Not every gel has the same properties. Today we're going to talk about the importance of flexibility in your products and when you need something hard, when you need something flexible, and how to know what to use when. Hey guys, Liz from the Nail Hub here. I am back for another episode of our nail fundamentals. And today we're going to talk about something really important. We're going to talk about flexibility and rigidity and how we test our products to see which gels we have are flexible and which ones are rigid. To get us started, I'm going to start with our overview and terminology. Today we're going to talk about porosity, swelling and shrinking, properties of a gel, which is really important to review, flexibility and tensile strength. And terminology you guys are going to need to know after this video is porosity, flexible versus rigid, tensile strength, bonds, and permeability. All right, so first I wanted to show you an example of what the natural nail looks like when we're thinking about the different types of natural nails. So I'm going to go over to my tabletop, and I've actually got 3 different sponges here. And I like using sponges because sponges are very similar to our natural nails when we're thinking of an analogy of what our natural nails look like under the products that we put on them. So let's start here in the middle, and actually I'll rearrange these a little bit. Okay, so this first sponge is what I would say represents a natural nail. And this is a healthy natural nail. It is porous. So we've got some holes here, and but it's normal, right? It's not too flexed, it's not too swollen. It's just a regular fresh sponge, and this is exactly what our nails look like when we look at them at a very, very microscopic level. Our natural nails have holes in them naturally. They're porous, which means they have spaces in between the material, and they are able to absorb water. So that's why I love using the sponge analogy for nails. Here is a natural nail that is swollen with water. Okay, so if we imagine this is the surface of the natural nail, or this is the material of our natural nail, this is a natural nail that is swollen with water or cuticle oil. It's very flexible, and all of the spaces inside of the material are taken up with for example, if this was a client who uses cuticle oil, then this nail would be full of cuticle oil and it wouldn't be able to absorb water. But in this situation, I'm using one that has been swollen with water, just like a sponge. And here is a nail after it has been dehydrated and there's no longer water in it. So you can see how much the natural nail would warp, just like a dried sponge. It goes from a regular nail that looks normal and has some natural curvature to it. It goes to swollen once it absorbs a ton of water. And then when it dries out, we've got this warped, rigid, curled type of shape to the natural nail. Okay, so I want you guys to think about sponges. When you're thinking about natural nails, this is exactly what's happening when we've got a regular nail. We get water on the nail or inside the nail, and the nail swells. And then once the nail dehydrates, then we've got this curved, warped type of surface that we're trying to put product on top of. And this is what happens underneath the products. Even if you've got product on top of your nails, you can still go from this to this with acrylic, gel, nail polish, anything on top of it, okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about product on top of our natural nail. And I'm going to use an example just to show you guys, just to demonstrate the flexibility. So let's really quickly review our terminology before I get too ahead of myself. Okay, so porosity is a measure of the spaces in a material. So we're talking about, it's sometimes called void fraction. So it's basically the amount of empty spaces in a material. And our nails are very porous, so there are lots of spaces, just like those sponges that I showed you. The swelling and shrinking we just talked about, which is our nails can absorb water. They can also absorb other things like cuticle oil and other emollients like lotions, ointments, which is very helpful in preventing water from getting in there. But when our nails swell and shrink due to water exposure, we also get that warped factor, which is what I showed you with that very dried out sponge. We're going to talk about properties of gel in a second, but I wanted you guys to also understand permeability. Permeability is another word that we've got here on our terminology for the day. Permeability is actually a product's ability for things to go through it. So you can imagine if we've got this porosity, which is the holes on a material, the empty spaces on a material, the more empty spaces, usually the more permeable it is going to be, which means things are able to pass through it, like water, okay? So something can be porous and it can also be permeable, but the two are not the exact same thing. All right, so I'm going to show you guys another prop that I have to demonstrate what happens underneath nail products. Because a lot of times we think of, if we've got a really bendy nail, we're gonna put super rigid product on top of it. And rigid is essentially the opposite of flexible. So flexible means something is really, really bendy. Rigid means it is not able to bend at all, okay? So flexible, rigid. I've got cutting boards here to show you guys the difference between the two. And I wanted to talk about this because I know there are a lot of nail technicians and also a lot of DIYers, a lot of people who do their nails, period, that have issues with products, and they have issues with nails. And every time they go to put product on a very weak nail, or they're trying to add strength to that nail, they go for a super rigid product that does not bend, because they're thinking, hey, the stronger the material, the more this is gonna work for this bendy nail that I'm working on. It's gonna make that nail rock hard, and that's what we're looking for. What can actually happen is that you end up with a nail that bends and flexes away from it. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this rigid cutting board as my little prop here. And let's start with a regular natural nail, okay? So you can see that this natural nail is fine. It's not super flexible like this. And so this nail would be fine with a rigid material on top of it because it's not gonna bend and flex away from the product that's on top. This product isn't gonna bend hardly at all. It might be a little bit, like if I throw it on the floor and we looked at it in slow motion, you might see a little bit of movement in the plastic. But with gel, it's very, very similar. When we're working with gels, we're working with essentially forms of plastics. And so this is an example of a very, very rigid gel, which means this gel would not bend very much on the natural nail, okay? So let's imagine this is our natural nail. We put this product on top. Might be a good match because this natural nail doesn't bend very much. It's got a little bit of inherent flexibility, but it's not gonna bend and pop away from the product that we've put on top of it. Now, let's talk about a nail that's really well moisturized, really flexible, okay? So this is a nail that would bend and flex with whatever we put on top of it. And you can see there's actually, if I push on it, there's no gaps between the cutting board and this nail, because this nail is gonna bend and flex with whatever we put on top of it, and it's gonna stay put because it's healthy, it's well moisturized, it's gonna conform to the shape of the product that we've put on top of it. And because this nail per se, this sponge, but I'm using this as an example of a nail, because we've been able to fill this nail with natural oils or cuticle oil, or we've been able to fill up that porousness in the nail with a product that is going to keep water away, this nail isn't going to dry out. It's going to stay just like this, and it's going to always conform to the product that's on top of it. So in the two situations, a very healthy natural nail and also a nail that is well moisturized, it's going to work well with a rigid product, and we're going to be able to use whatever flexible or rigid product that we want. Now you can imagine if your nail is totally dried out and it's curling away, and I'll even flip this around so you guys can see the curl. So this is exactly what happens when a nail swells with water and then dehydrates, or when we've got a weak nail that actually bends too much under a very rigid product. And so you get the corners curling away, you get the product staying put, but the natural nail is peeling away from the product underneath. And you'll often see this with corners of nails. So if you put a very rigid product on a flexible nail, a lot of times the corners of the nail will pop off and you'll have separation on the corners or somewhere around the free edge of the product. And that is a telltale sign that you've got a super rigid product on a very bendy nail, and the nail is bending and flexing away from it. That can happen just with impact, or it can happen through the process of swelling and shrinking when the nail absorbs a lot of water. And our nails naturally absorb water, and that's why cuticle oil and other emollients and other, lotions and creams are a really good idea for your clients or even for yourself. Even if you've got product on your nail, you can imagine we've got product on the nail, but we're able to also apply oil at the end of the free edge, and so that product is able to get into the natural nail from the bottom, not just the top, okay? So I wanted to use this as a demonstration of what happens when we put really, really rigid, non-flexible product on a nail, that it's not suited for every type of nail. And this is really important to think about when we're choosing the type of products we're going to use on a given person. All right, now I've got another example. This cutting board, which I'm going to use to signify a different type of gel, is very flexible. So you can see it bends, it flexes like this, all kinds of different ways. It also has tensile strength, which means it's going to be able to withstand breakage under any type of drastic force. So tensile strength is a product's ability to withstand any type of pressure, pulling, anything. It's the ability for a product to even curve when we're talking about gels without snapping in the middle, okay? So this has a lot of tensile strength. It's able to bend and flex and curve, and I can even try and tear it and it doesn't tear. With this, if I was actually to put tensile strength on it, again, this is a very, very strong cutting board, but if this was a very rigid glass-like gel, which we'll get into when we test them in a second, is you can imagine if I was to bend this in half like a piece of gel, I would snap it right down the middle, okay? So we also want to take into consideration flexibility and tensile strength when we're choosing the products that we're going to use on bendy nails. So I'll ask you, what do you think this type of gel, if this was our gel on the natural nail, what kind of nail would this gel be good for? You're going to say flexible, right? Because it's bendy, it's flexible, the corners bend and flex. So you can imagine a nail that's weak or curling. Oh, let me get this lined up for you, okay? So our nail product is going to be able to bend and flex and conform to this nail that we have underneath it. And this is a really important visual for you guys, because when you're thinking of damaged nails, weak nails, bendy nails, and you're trying to make the nail stronger, or you're trying to make the products last longer, it doesn't always come down to super rigid products. It actually can come down to using a very flexible product and trying to match that flexibility for what we're trying to achieve. I hope that makes sense. But I've got these cutting boards to kind of demonstrate flexible versus rigid, and also what our natural nail looks like in different situations. So we've got our regular natural nail, we've got our nail that's nice and soaked up with oil, but if we don't have oil in our nail and it just soaks up water, this is what's going to happen to our nail after the water dehydrates. So I hope that's a good visual for you guys to think about when you're working on nails and when you're working for products, with products. So how do we know? This is the big question, right? So you're like, okay, Liz, I get it. Flexible, rigid, I get the whole natural nail thing. But how do we know which of our gels is the right gel for that particular situation? All of our gels have something on the label and it says, you know, shiny, or it says strong or extreme or whatever. And a lot of the times it just says builder gel, or it doesn't say anything at all except the color name. But how do we know which gel is going to work well for different types of nails? All right, so let's get into testing them. I am going to take a nail form backing. You can use saran wrap, wax paper, anything that will allow your gel to peel off. And if you want to put gloves on for this, you absolutely can. So let's test some different gels. And I want to start with something that I think is going to be extremely flexible. So I'm just going to take, and it can be anything. It can be potted gel, it can be bottle gel, it can be color, it can be top coat, anything. And something also important to talk about at this point that I know a lot of people ask me about is spider webbing, or I call it spider webbing, but it's when you put top coat over a bendy nail and you get that shattering, and the shatter on the top coat actually gets filled with dust or dirt, and pretty soon, if you're wearing a light color, it looks like you've got a spider web on top of your nails. I think it looks like a spider web. So that shattering that happens with top coats happens sometimes when we're choosing a very rigid top coat that cannot bend and flex with the nail underneath it. Everything else is bending and flexing except for the top coat, and it snaps in certain places and we get those cracks, and then the cracks get filled with dirt. So this is gonna allow you to also check, you know, base coats, top coats, builder gels, color gels, any type of product you're going to put on a nail. You can use this test to figure out how it's going to behave. And that's what I meant when I mentioned the properties of gel when we talked about our overview for the day. It's really important to analyze the properties of your gel and not just go off of what's written on the label. So a lot of times a gel will say extreme builder. Okay, but what does that mean? What does it do? Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it flexible? Is it rigid? Is it shiny? Is it not shiny? Is it rubbery? Is it, not rubbery? Is it powdery? There's lots of different properties to gel. So I wanted to show you guys how you can start to really analyze what your gels are and how they behave. Because at the end of the day, gel is gel. It's just we have different formulas for different purposes. Adhesion, color, shine, durability, strength, everything, right? It's basically all the same material, but we're formulating it slightly differently for different purposes. Okay, so let's get back to our test. So we are going to, oh, I got dirt on my thing already. Okay, so we are going to use a form backing, which is just literally like a piece of waxy paper. And I am going to paint some gels on here and I'm gonna test them. So let's start with one that I think is gonna be pretty dang flexible. And this is a bottled builder gel. And again, you can do this with top coats, base coats, anything. And it is a good idea to test everything and write it down. So you can start making a list of all of your gels, make like a little chart of all of your gels, and then write down what happens. Is it flexible? Is it shiny? And that way you're gonna be able to refer to that when you start working. So I've got a nice medium coating on the form backing, and I'll put another one next to it. So let's try a slightly different one. And I'm not even gonna tell you what these are. I'm just gonna put some gel on here and we're gonna test it. Okay. And wearing gloves is a nice idea because then when it comes out of the lamp, you don't have to clean this. You can just go straight into playing around with it, but I'm not gonna wear gloves today because I ran out. Okay, so I'm gonna put my lid back on and then I'm just gonna cure this. Now already something interesting that you guys can start to see about the properties of this gel. When you're doing this, you can start to see different things like, is this one more self-leveling than this one is? This one has a slightly blue tint. I don't know if you guys can see that, but sometimes manufacturers will put a blue tint in the product to help with yellowing. But just, as you start to play with your products, you're going to start to notice differences between them that aren't things that are listed on the label. Okay, so we're going to cure that. So like I said, it's a great idea while that's curing. I'm just gonna talk to you guys a little bit about keeping a chart of your products. And I personally do this. So I actually keep, because I'm a total nerd and I went to finance school, I keep Excel spreadsheets on my products. So I have a little chart where it has the product manufacturer, it has the product name, and then it has different properties across the top, like shiny, flexible, rubbery when filing, easy to remove as far as, when we're soaking off products. And I can kind of keep track of all the different properties of that particular gel. And that way, when I'm working on someone, I can easily refer to that chart. I can print it out, put it in my drawer or put it on my wall. And I can easily refer to those products so that I can remember, oh yeah, this one would be perfect for this client because it's more of a flexible gel and my client's nails are very flexible. And you can think about and even you can put soak off, non-soak off, all of those different things. The other thing I wanted to mention that's really important is that a lot of people have the misconception that because something is hard gel, it is going to be rigid. That actually isn't the case, and I wanted to quickly clean up the difference between the two. All right, so on one hand, we've got hard gel. Hard gel means that it is not able to be soaked off with acetone, which you want to say also that it's not porous, okay? So because it doesn't have many spaces between the bonds, it has a very tight bond when we're looking at the way that the product cures, the acetone is not able to get in between those spaces and it's not able to break up the product. Soak off, on the other hand, soak off gel is more porous, and it has looser bonds, so maybe it looks like this. It's got spaces in between the bonds, and so the acetone is able to get in between and break up the product. So hard gel means it cannot be soaked off with acetone. Soak off gel means it can be soaked off with acetone. But within these two categories, we also have flexible, rigid, shiny, not shiny, builder gel, non-builder gel. So just because something says it's builder gel doesn't mean it's going to be hard gel. It could also be soak off gel, okay? And you might also hear people refer to soak off gel as soft gel, but I don't like using that term because nowadays you can have a hard gel that's very flexible and means it's kind of soft. So I like to use hard gel, soak off gel, and then in those two categories we have lots of different types of products, including you can even have hard gel color gels. So really the two categories are soak off and hard, and then within inside of that we have all different types of properties that we can formulate for specific needs. Okay, so my gel is now cured, and because I don't have gloves on, I'm going to take a wipe with some cleanser, and I'm just going to clean off the inhibition layer. There shouldn't be an inhibition layer on the bottom because the top is the only part that was exposed to oxygen while curing. And obviously it depends on the gel that you're using as well, because some gels do not cure with an inhibition layer. Okay, so let's just peel these off. Should be pretty easy to peel off. And again, the part that was not exposed to oxygen should not have any inhibition layer on it, so you should be able to touch it, but you can just clean them so you're not getting uncured product or inhibition layer on your fingers. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at these. All right, I would say that this one, if I clean it properly, is a little bit shinier than this one. You guys might disagree with me, but this is also hard to show on camera. And actually maybe I'll put, real quick, let me just put something black underneath this so you guys can see it a little bit better. Is that a little bit better for you guys to see? Okay, there we go. So this one I think is more shiny, right? This one has kind of like a weird rubbery finish to it. So this one's shiny. You guys don't even know what this is yet. I haven't told you whether it's base or top coat or builder gel. All right, so let's try bending it. Okay, so this one is very bendy. Can you see I can completely bend that gel without it snapping in half? I can roll it, I can twist it, and I can try and tear it, and it doesn't tear. I can pull on it, it doesn't stretch, but it is extremely flexible, really nice and flexible. So let's try it with the other one. Oh, I can already hear that it just is snappy, snappy, snappy. Ooh. All right, so when I bend it, you can see that it keeps like this weird triangular shape, whereas this one went completely back to its original shape. So this one has good tensile strength because it's not actually snapping, but it is definitely more rigid than this one is, okay? So this product would not be good for a super bendy nail. This one would be, because this is going to be nice and flexible, bend with the nail. And this, oh gosh, that is really hard to bend. You can see it just stays in that shape. Doesn't snap, but it definitely stays in that shape, whereas this one does not. And also the other thing that's really interesting about this is when we get into pinching C-curves underneath the nail, which we'll get into when we start to do artificial enhancements, you'd also want to figure out that, like, hey, this one over here isn't going to hold something that I pinch. So if I pinch a C-curve into this, you know, if I want to create that nice arch in the nail underneath the C-curve, I can do that and I can pinch it, but it's not going to hold that shape. See how much it bounces back to its original shape? Whereas look at this one, it's still curved and I only pinched it once. So this is really interesting to look at and to just toy around with and see how your gels behave, okay? So now I'm going to tell you guys which one is which. All right, so the really rigid one that kept its shape is actually a hard gel top coat. This gel can also, though, because it's shiny, it can be used as hard gel top coat. And this is one of the top coats that I usually recommend for when you don't want a nail to stain. It's called Accents Ultra Gloss. I really like this top coat, and I'm able to use this over almost any product because it does bend and flex. I can use this over gel polish a lot of the times and it doesn't shatter. So when I bend it in half, it doesn't snap in half, which means that even though it's less flexible, it's going to last even over more flexible nails. And because it's hard gel, it's not porous, so pigments and other things cannot permeate it. And it is going to be perfect for hairdressers, people that have staining. So I like to use this on light colored nails, French manicures and stuff like that, where I want to prevent the nail from changing color from pigment rubbing on top of it and getting in between those pores. So this is actually a top coat, but I've actually also used this gel, which is funny because it's supposed to be a top coat. I have used this gel also for my extensions when I'm doing hard gel nails because it is really nice to pinch. It's flexible, slightly, but it really holds a pinch really well. And so I like using this for artificial nails. So that just goes to show you that just because something is top coat doesn't mean you have to use it as top coat if you understand, and this is the important part, if you understand the properties of how this gel behaves. All right, this one, the really bendy one, is actually a soak off builder gel in a bottle. So this is a builder gel, which a lot of people would be like, wait a minute, I thought builder gel was supposed to be super strong and for making really long nails. Well, not necessarily. So I want you guys to start testing your gels to see what happens, which ones are rigid, which ones are flexible, which ones are shiny, which ones aren't, and you can start to really map out how this is all going to behave. And also it's really important to understand that just because something says base coat or it says top coat or it says builder gel or whatever, doesn't mean it's going to inherently be flexible or it's going to inherently be rigid. There are lots of variations to what we work with, okay? So this is a really great test to do with all of your gels. And I encourage you to try different products and cure them and play around with them to see how this would behave. You can even file this too. So you can whip out a nail file it and just see like, what does it feel like? Does it feel powdery when you file it? And what I mean by that is, for example, let me just grab a nail file. Okay, so here's my super rigid gel. If I start filing it like this, you can hear that sound. It files really nice and sharp. It's kind of like glass-like when I file it. And what I mean is that I don't feel any dragging or pulling when I'm filing it. It just files like nice, hard, rigid plastic, okay? So this is kind of nice for if you're wanting to really create, a specific shape. If you're finish filing artificial nails, sometimes when we're working with rubbery nails, it can be hard to e-file because it just kind of grabs and it feels like you're filing on a tire. This one, let's just test it and see what happens. You can kind of see like it's so bendy, it flexes while I am filing it. So this one is going to be more of kind of a rubbery feel. And if I go to e-file this, it's also going to feel very rubbery when I file it. So that's what I mean when I say rubbery or glass-like. I start to use words to describe what I mean. And you can still see this one is still bent. It's held that shape even though I pinched it just once, whereas this one is going to be super flexible, bendy, and if I roll it, it'll just go back to its original shape, okay? So I hope this is really helpful for you to identify what gels you currently own, what properties they have, and I really encourage you to start investigating the properties of your gel because it'll help you understand how it's going to behave on the nail. Manufacturers make products for specific things. Maybe they've had a request for a high adhesion base coat, and so they create that. But manufacturers also don't test every single potential use of the product, and they may not be able to tell you exactly all the properties of the gel. And a lot of manufacturers, I think, they try to keep it simple. They try to just say, hey, this is super shiny top coat, and assume that that's what it's going to be used for. But you may not understand that super shiny top coat could be super rigid and crack under pressure, or it could be something that is porous, even though it's super shiny, and so it stains. And so that is a really good thing for you to understand. And what I mean also, just to clarify, just in case I'm not being clear during this video, is when we think about something that is porous like this, okay, so like this sponge, for example, you can imagine that if I were to wipe something over the top of it and then try to wipe it off, it would all get stuck inside of there, right? So like, let's say I took hair dye and I put hair dye on this, okay? The hair dye is absolutely gonna stain this because it's got all those pores. It's going to absorb that hair dye. The hair dye is gonna get in there and it's gonna stain this nail, if this were the nail. Think about now a nail that's more like glass, like a mirror. Okay, if I put hair dye on a mirror, I can immediately wipe that hair dye off and nothing's gonna happen because it's not as porous. So that is what I want you also to think about when it comes to porosity. Permeability, if the material allows things to pass through it, like water, oils, anything like that. Our nails are very porous and they're also permeable. They allow gas and liquids to move through them. And I want you to think about flexibilities of your products and really start to get familiar with what your products do and how they're going to behave, because it's going to make such a huge difference in the choices that you make for yourself and also for the people that you work on. if you are curious about this kind of stuff, or you want to ask, like, let's say you're going to buy something that you've never bought before, I really encourage you also to ask the manufacturer about these different properties. Ask them, hey, is your top coat flexible as well as shiny? Because a lot of times the manufacturer may take it for granted, or they may not even think about that. And if you're looking for something that isn't going to stain, but also is able to be used on flexible nails, you're going to ask for a hard gel that's shiny and also is flexible. And so you want to ask the manufacturer, hey, I'm interested in buying this product, but I wanted to check if it has these properties, and they will absolutely be able to tell you. If the manufacturer is not able to tell you about the properties of their gel, in my humble opinion, I would not buy products from a manufacturer that doesn't understand the ins and outs of their products, because that's probably means that they just get it off of some factory line, slap a sticker on it, and call it a day. And I don't personally like working with companies like that, because I like to know what I'm buying, and I like to know that the company that I'm buying from knows also what I'm buying. And so I like to actually ask those difficult questions, because it really helps me to understand what kind of company I'm purchasing from. Do they even understand what's in their products, and do they understand how their products are going to behave? And by asking these questions, it's going to help improve the products that they already sell, and that's just helpful to everyone. Okay, so I really encourage you to do these tests. And to wrap up today, I want to go over the do's and don'ts. So just to review, you definitely want to test every gel that you buy. If you're a professional nail technician, going to trade shows is a great place to do this, because you're able to see the gels live, you're able to toy around with them, and you can ask for things like demonstrations. Again, if you're also buying online, which a lot of people like to buy online, I know I love to buy online, you can ask the store or ask the manufacturer that you're buying from about their products, and ask them these questions. Hey, I'm interested in X product, but I wanted to know, is it flexible or is it rigid? Is it shiny? Is it not shiny? Does it have good adhesion? You know, you can ask all these questions via email, or a lot of companies have Facebook Messenger, etc. Analyze the properties, not just labels. So again, going back to what I said about a top coat might be super shiny, and that's what they made it for. But if you remember my hard gel top coat, it can also be used as an extension gel. And the way I can figure that out is by testing it and seeing, is it strong? Is it rigid? And also wearing it and seeing what happens when I wear it on myself for a couple weeks, using it for different things. And the more you get familiar with products and the properties of gel, the more of a master you're going to become of your craft, because you're going to know exactly how to use something, whether you've seen it before or not. There are a lot of times when I pick up a gel I've never used, I have no idea what the name of it is, and manufacturers try to come up with either descriptive names or cute names, but I like to test it first so that I understand right away, regardless of what's on the label, I understand exactly what this gel is supposed to do. Definitely categorize your own products. So once you have your whole arsenal of products, you can go through them and start to create that chart of, is it flexible, shiny, rigid, rubbery, yellow, blue, green, whatever. You can start to write down all of the categories or the different properties of your products, and keep those on hand so that you can refer to them when you're working. And also follow manufacturer instructions for sure. I mean, if something says, do not use it for X, Y, and Z, I'm not saying go against manufacturer instructions, but I want you to just at least look at the way the manufacturer has created this product and what they created it for, and then you can ask additional questions to get more information about the product before you purchase it, or play with a little bit so that you understand better what this product is capable of. Our don'ts for the day: don't use something you haven't tested. I see this so many times where people get excited about something, they buy it after seeing it once, and they immediately start to use it on someone else, especially paying clients. And that to me is the biggest no-no, because you're experimenting on a paying client. You definitely don't want to use something that you haven't tested. And I like to get familiar with my products first, categorize them, understand the properties, even before I put it on myself, and especially before I put it on someone else. Don't use rigid products for bendy nails. So if you remember my rigid cutting board, my hard cutting board that doesn't bend at all, stronger doesn't necessarily mean better, and stronger doesn't always mean rigid. And so I want you to start to think about what types of products you're using, and if that's impacting the durability of the sets of nails that you're doing. Because a lot of times people go for super rigid products to fix a soft, weak nail, and that's not necessarily going to work very well. And also, don't assume all products will work on everyone. I like to, for the sake of efficiency, I do like to use the same products on all of my clients to start with. But quickly after that, I can start to figure out, hey, this isn't gonna work on someone because their nails are too flexible, or maybe their nails are too rigid, and they need something that also matches that. So as you get more familiar, you're gonna be able to start to create those recipes or those prescriptions, per se, of services that you're gonna be able to track for specific people, and you can keep that on hand to understand, hey, for Mary, who comes every 2 weeks, I know I'm gonna use these products on her because that's what her nails are like. And I keep track of that in a notebook so that I never forget what I put on Mary versus what I put on Cindy. So those are some great tips for you guys to understand how all of this works. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this is really helpful for you to understand better about the products that you're working with and the products that you already own. And I do get asked a lot about, like, Liz, what about this brand of top coat? What about this brand of base coat? Now you're gonna be able to understand what those products do regardless of what brand they are. And that's really, really powerful as a nail technician. For me, picking brands that I work with comes down to more of who the company is, the quality of their products, and also the companies that I identify with as a nail technician. And it's less of what the name of their product is, or, you know, if they have a cute name or a descriptive name on their top coat. I like to test their products and see, is their product high quality? Are they themselves as a company high quality? Do they know their stuff inside and out? And are they responsive to the questions that I ask? And do I identify with their products? Are they useful to me? Do they identify with my clientele that I work on? Okay? All right, thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be in touch again next week with another awesome video. And I hope you guys have an awesome time practicing. All right, bye.